Yeah.
Right. So I will quickly share the document of what we're going to be discussing tonight. So let me see. Can you all see that? Yeah. Has that shared? Thumbs up. Yeah. Simon, yeah. You can see it? Yeah, yeah. Sweet.
Mm.
Right. So the first thing I wanted to discuss is a question that I get quite often, and it's what is the best cardio for fat loss? So to understand what the best cardio is, first of all, we have to understand what energy systems we use in our body. So the two main energy systems is your anaerobic system, or some people call it your glycolic system, and then your aerobic system. So your anaerobic system is the system that your body would use for short, high intense exercise. So like your HIIT classes, your EMOMs, like any sort of circuit training, um, like 100 meter sprint, whenever you're lifting weights. So like, whenever you're lifting weights and you're like really pushing it, you're not really breathing that much. You're like, and then holding your breath while you're driving. So your body is still able to produce energy, even though um, you're not you're not um, you're not using your oxygen to create the energy. So that energy system is pretty much dependent on something called glycogen. So we're going to discuss what glycogen actually is and especially how glycogen will affect the weight on the scale whenever you weigh in every morning. So if you're using if you're using high intensity exercise as your form of cardio, you will burn a lot of calories per minute, but it's not something that you can sustain for long periods of time. Like if I asked you to do a 100-meter sprint and then give you 10 seconds rest and said, right, go again, right, 10 seconds rest, go again. After 3 or 4 sprints, you're absolutely busted and you're probably vomiting on the side of the track. So yes, it burns a lot of calories per minute, but it isn't a very sustainable. Like that's why most like high intensity classes, like what that we run at TFIT, for example, they're all like 30-minute classes because if you are actually pushing into those higher intensities, you're not going to be able to last for very long. So it's really good if you're trying to build strength or power or like your sprinting ability, but it's not something that's very sustainable. So then the other option, the other energy system that you would use would be your aerobic system. So that's where you're breathing like short and steadily all the time. And the primary fuel source for steady state cardio, so like walking on a treadmill, incline walking, sitting on a bike, pedaling at like a normal decent pace where you're not like really pushing it really hard. So your body's going to use that oxygen to then burn fat. So your fat cells are going to be your primary source of your primary source of fuel. So whenever I recommend then for people what cardio to use, then my recommendation is always going to be steady state because if you're ideally looking to burn fat as your primary fuel source, then you want to be doing that slow intensity stuff, which then brings us into how do you know what what type of cardio you are actually doing. So this is where we would come into what's called like your heart rate zones. So an easy way to calculate your heart rate is if you take your age, sorry, you take 220 minus your age. So for me, 220 minus 44, that'll give me 176. So my max heart rate as a 44-year-old is roughly around 176 beats per minute. So to get into what's known as like the fat burning zone, which is zone two, you would want to be between 60 and 70% of your maximum heart rate. So for me, that's between 105 till about 125. So I know that if I'm monitoring on my watch, I want my heart rate to be sitting between 105 to 125. So I know from my own training that if I'm doing a walk on a treadmill at a slight incline of like 3 or 4%, my heart rate normally sits between 115 and 120. So that's like exactly where I want it to be. And because it's not really high intensity, I'm able to keep going for longer periods of time. So the longer I can stay on, the more fat cells I'm burning. And it's also that you it doesn't take a lot out of your recovery. Whereas if you're doing something like a class where you're doing like squats, kettlebell swings, deadlifts, burpees, all this sort of stuff, it's going to be really taxing on your body. So like if I was to do a class like that on a today and then I'm going in tomorrow morning and I'm trying to squat with a barbell on my back, it's going to affect my ability to squat the next day. So the way I try and explain to people is you want your resistance training, so your weight training to be that's your bread and butter of your training. So that's what's going to change the size and shape of your muscles. And then the cardio works in conjunction with that to reduce the number of fat cells that you have. So that way, then the muscle that's underneath starts to become visible. So if you don't have a smartwatch or you're not looking at your heart rate, one thing that I tell people is to get into your zone two training, you would want to be doing something that's got the intensity where you could be able to hold a conversation with someone. So you could be walking on the treadmill and someone could be standing beside you and the two of you could be having a conversation. Or if you're walking outside and the two of you are walking side by side, you're walking at a brisk pace to get your heart rate up, your breath is getting a little bit faster, but you still want to be able to hold a conversation. If you get to the point where you're past that, generally that means you're now creeping into more zone three. So your zone three would be zone 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 one would be just a leisurely stroll through the park with no real pace. Zone two would be then where you're upping the intensity slightly. So whether that's on a treadmill on an incline or another one is like a weight vest, or if you don't have a weight vest, you can like literally get a backpack, a couple of 2 liter bottles of water in the back of it. And those additional few kilos that you're carrying will then increase your intensity slightly. If you get to the point then where you're getting above 70%, so between 70 to 85%, that's where you'd be in zone three training. So you would be burning some body fat and you would be burning some glycogen as well. Then once you get into that really high intensity stuff, that's where you're then fat doesn't really count at that stage. Your body wants for your body to metabolize the fat, it's a slow process. Your body wants the instant energy from the glycogen. So that's why if you train first thing in the morning, your body's going to be burning glycogen. If um if you're training like weight training, I don't know if you've ever anyone's ever experienced this where you go in to do a workout first thing in the morning and you're really, really fresh and you start off great, and then halfway through the workout, your energy levels just crash. And that's because your body has burnt up whatever glycogen stores are in there, and now it's trying to metabolize fat for fuel, which is quite a slow and difficult process. So that's why if and when I'm telling people about doing cardio is do your cardio after your workout. So you want to make sure that you've got enough energy to do your resistance training and then follow it on with your cardio afterwards if you have to. Make sense? Any questions? So
Yeah, all good, Peter. Cheers.
let me just see. There's a couple other people looking in here. Um, yeah, right. So that's your your cardio zones, right? So then another question is it better to do the cardio fasted or non-fasted? So by fasted, what you mean is getting up first thing in the morning and doing your cardio. So if you're doing your cardio first thing in the morning, again, your body's going to have limited amounts of glycogen because maybe it's been like 10, 12 hours before you've since you've last eaten. So there's going to be very, very small amounts of glycogen in your body. So that's why then whenever you start out on a weight session first thing in the morning, the first half of the weight session goes great. And if you haven't had any carbs before you go to the gym, you just start losing power halfway through. But whenever you're doing cardio first thing in the morning, because you're only doing that steady state low intensity and you're preferentiating your fat cells, then that's why there's like people like are really, really big proponents of like fasted cardio first thing in the morning. Which if you want to do your higher intensity or medium intensity where you're burning glycogen and fat, you're going to burn all your glycogen very fast, and then you're going to have to go into the fat cells. So what's better, what's worse? It's up to the individual. Like some people like the feeling of going in and doing like a sweaty, high intensity workout where they actually feel that they've really pushed themselves. And if that's what you want, then that's fine. But from anyone that's trained with me, you know that I'm like a big proponent of walking. Like it's free, like you can open up your door and just go outside and have a walk. Like the one negative thing about Northern Ireland as well, though, is like, yourselves, you could be walking and you could have a pair of sunglasses on when you leave the house and you could have a raincoat on by the time you get home. So this time of the year, whenever the weather's a bit more unpredictable, let's just say, I'll generally do my weight training and then I'll go on the treadmill and do like an incline walk, because it doesn't affect my recovery and you can do it for long periods of time and you can get your steps up, burn a lot of calories. And the there's the whole thing of like your 10,000 steps a day. So my goal is usually for someone in a fat loss phase, I tell people to go between 10 and 12,000 steps. So 12,000 steps, depending on the individual, 12,000 steps will burn around 500 calories. So 500 calories a day over the course of a week is 3,500 calories that you burn. A pound of fat is 3,500 calories. So if you're hitting 12K steps a day, you could literally eat on maintenance and you could lose a pound of body fat per week. So that's why I tell people, like I've probably used this analogy before, pulling two threads. I would rather reduce someone's calories by like 250 and increase their activity slightly. So now all of a sudden, I'm putting them in a greater deficit by increasing the activity. Because if you're in a fat loss phase, and a fat loss phase maybe lasting 8, 10, 12 weeks, depending on the individual, how much body fat they need to lose, the more food we can keep giving the person, the more chance they have of success. Whenever you like, if you're just relying solely on reducing calories all the time, you're going to get very, very sad very quickly because you're going to be looking at plates of food and be like, Jesus Christ, is this all I have to eat? And it's a mental thing. Like you start, like then you start going, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. Whereas if the food stays quite sustainable and the steps increase, I know I'd much rather go out for an extra 30-minute walk and have more food. And that way you get less what's known as diet fatigue. So it's not just this the physical side of it, it's the psychological side of it. Like if I tell you you can't have this thing, you're going to crave this thing. So if we tell you you can't have this food, you're going to crave that food. And if you multiply that out over 12 weeks, then by the end of the diet, you're looking at stuff in the supermarket and you're walking past the shelves in Tesco's going, oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. And maybe it's stuff that you've never really eaten before, but that's whenever diet fatigue starts getting really, really high. And generally, then what'll happen is if you know your diet ends on a certain day, you're already planning, I'm going to have this and I'm going to eat this and I'm going to have this takeout and I'm going to buy these sweets and I'm going to have this ice cream and like whatever it is. And then you finish your diet and you have this like 3, 4 day binge of like just pigging out and eating loads and loads of stuff. And then all of a sudden you've put like 2 or 3 kilos back on in the space of 4 days, like 2 or 3 kilos that you worked so hard to take off. And now that weight's like back on again. Like it's happened so fast. Like guys, I've done it like so many times in my powerlifting career where I'd be like I'd be cutting really, really strict and to make weight for a competition, and I would compete on the Saturday morning, and Saturday night I would just binge eat, and Sunday I would binge eat, and like I'd weigh in for the competition. I'd be like 92 kilos when I weighed in the competition, and by Monday morning I'd be like 95, 96. And it was just literally just diet fatigue. So I've made the mistake so many times before, and that's why now I find that increasing activity is going to give you much more chances of success. And it's not just about getting the weight off. If you've had a diet where you've lost a lot of weight and then the diet finishes and then you put the weight back on, was it really a success? Because you're back to square one. So that's why my recommendation for everyone is there for cardio is to get their steps in. So that brings us to the next thing, which is something that you've heard me talk about a couple of times. This is glycogen. So what actually is glycogen? So glycogen is how our bodies store carbohydrates. So whenever You eat carbohydrates, you are going to use some of them in your day-to-day activity where you're like literally just walking around, walking up and down the stairs, doing whatever. Like your body will burn up certain amounts of carbohydrates. Whatever additional carbohydrates you don't use, your body stores them for a rainy day, and it stores them in your muscles and in your liver. And then that way, whenever you are doing these high intensity activities, your body's got a backup battery where it can get the fuel from. So with every gram of glycogen your body stores, your body needs water to attach to the glycogen for it to be able to store it. So every gram of glycogen is attached to 3 to 4 grams of water. Now, for a meal, you can store around 1.2 kilograms of glycogen in your body. For a female, it's around 800 grams. So how this will affect your weight on the scale, like fluctuations in weight on the scale, is if you go out for dinner, like say you go to, like say you get a takeaway, even you get a Chinese and there's loads of rice, noodles, stuff like that, which is basically just pure carbohydrates. Your body's going to take all those additional carbohydrates and it's going to store them as glycogen. And so, say you've stored a kilo of glycogen and then your body uses another 3 kilos of water, your weight can literally go up by 4 kilos from like one day of eating out. And for anyone that's had this, like Simon, you were out for dinner last week, you go to a restaurant and there's like high carbohydrate foods that you eat. And even if you are mindful, then your weight like goes up by a couple of kilos. And like I told you last week, Simon, like you know that I'll tell you in a couple of days, you'll be back down to where you were. And it's just understanding that that's where those fluctuations come from, is from the increased glycogen in your body. And you know that then whenever you are eating out as well, like if you think about what those foods are also cooked in, so something like rice, pasta, noodles, they're all cooked in water. So the actual carbohydrate inflates when it gets cooked because there's more water in it, and then it goes into your stomach. And once it's sitting in your stomach, then it also absorbs the liquid that's in your stomach and makes you retain more water. So that's why you get these like huge fluctuations when you go out. So that brings us to the next thing then is eating out, which is those restaurant meals are going to contain more carbohydrates and more processed carbohydrates than you're probably used to eating, which is going to then increase your like so fries, bread, pastas, rices, noodles. Those are going to make you store more glycogen, which is going to make your scale weight go up. And then in addition to that, a lot of restaurants are going to quite heavily season their food. So then the increased sodium makes your body retain more water. So that's why you get these like huge fluctuations. Like something, for example, like a pizza. So you're getting a carbohydrate base, which is just like flour and water, the carbohydrate base of a pizza. Then you add in into addition to that, then the majority of meats that are put in a pizza are like cured meats. What are they cured in? Salt. So then the sodium levels go up, making you retain more water. Or like in a Chinese, most Chineses are going to use MSG as their flavoring. Um, MSG is monosodium glutamate, so really high levels of salt, which is going to keep your weight up as well. So just know that that's what's going to happen whenever you go out to a restaurant and you eat foods that are off plan, and that your weight will come down the next day. Like the last thing I want people to do is go out for a restaurant meal and their weight goes up and they're like, Jesus, I've just like completely fucked my whole diet here by going out for one meal. Well, everything's lost now. I may as well just go and eat more shite and go to McDonald's the next day and whatever. Like the analogy is if you get a flat tire, you don't get out of the car and stab the other three. You know, like just because you've had one night out, okay, we can deal with one night out. It's whenever like it becomes consecutive days out and consecutive days drinking alcohol. And alcohol again, like you're going to get additional calories from the alcohol, but also depending on what you drink, the the mixers that you have in the alcohol are going to be more additional carbohydrates. usually, and that's why then you're going to see the scale weight come up as well. And also, when you do drink alcohol, you're more likely to make poor food choices, as in you end up like going to someone's house and you're having a few drinks and you're munching on Pringles and nuts and snacks and whatever, and then you're hungry on the way home, so you stop and get a takeaway, and then you wake up the next morning, you're hungover, and you have a fry, or you go to McDonald's for a breakfast, and then you're too hungover and you don't leave the house because you want to just sit on the couch watching TV, and you don't do any activity, and then that night you're like, oh well, let's just get a pizza, and diet starts again on Monday, and like I see it all the time, so just be mindful. Like I'm not telling everyone to like don't go out and drink, don't go out for dinner with your significant other, but just know that this is what happens. So like every choice you make is either going to take you closer to your goal or further away from your goal. So the more choices you can make that are bringing you closer to your goal, then the more flexibility you can have on the back end to go out and enjoy yourself. So then when you are going out for dinner, like if you know you're going out for dinner, have a look at the menu of where you're going and see what kind of foods that they have that aren't going to completely mess your diet up. So like have your sauce on the side, have your dressings on the side, stuff like that. Like, because all the hidden calories and those kind of things will really mess up as well your diet, like because they're just so high calorie. So then, next thing that I want to talk about is preparation and why planning ahead is the key. So I just mentioned if you are going out for a meal in a restaurant or you know you're going away for a couple of days, whatever it is, speak to me in advance and tell me where you're going and what kind of restaurant you're going to, whatever, and we can make a plan of action that way you're not going to completely derail everything by going away because I don't want people to feel like they can't go away and enjoy themselves. I want people to still have a life. You know, the only way any of this is sustainable is that you can do stuff. You can have social times, you can go out, you can go on holidays. So planning ahead with stuff like that is great, but then also a big thing. This is something that's came up multiple times in the last few weeks with different clients, and they haven't planned ahead and they haven't went and bought groceries and they've got home from work and there's no food in the house and then they end up just going and getting a takeaway. So what I try and tell people is schedule your life like everyone that goes to work, like you've got a rota at work, you've got a list of tasks to do that day at work. Treat your life and your training the same. So if you're training 4 days a week, go right, well, I can train these days, or you're 3 days a week, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's it, non-negotiable. Those are my three training days. And then days when you're not training, do some food prep. So like for me and my wife, we go and get our groceries the same day every week. On Sunday, we prep food for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday we go get more groceries, and Thursday we prep for Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So that way we always know that there's food prepared and there's always containers of cooked food already in the house. So that way when you do come home from work and you're tired and you can't be arsed cooking, all you have to do is open the fridge, put whatever it is you're having into the bowl, put it in the scale, weigh it, microwave it. 5 minutes later, it's done. Like prepare prepare your stuff in advance, and even like my workouts, my cardio, my nutrition, like everything's planned out in advance. Like there's very few times where I'm ever caught with no food in the house. And even if you do get to a situation like that, like I have someone last week that, oh well, I didn't organize my shopping, so we ended up just getting a Chinese, and it's like if the shop was still open to go to the Chinese, then like surely there was a 24-hour garage or a supermarket or something still open. Like you can literally go to the supermarket and buy a packet of microwave rice, a packet of cooked chicken, and a bag of frozen vegetables. Defrost the frozen vegetables with boiling water, throw everything into the bowl, and you've got a meal there that takes like less than 5 minutes to cook. Like if you're ordering and waiting for someone to deliver to your house, or you're ordering it and going to pick it up, what's the difference in going to a shop and buying something healthy? So like for me, that's not a great excuse. Like, oh well, there was nothing in the house, so we had to get a Chinese. Well, no, you didn't. Like, and this is it goes back to the same thing as like you're either making choices that are bringing you towards the goal or you're making choices that are bringing you further away. And the more choices you can make that bring you closer to the goal, then the more flexibility you can have with all the times. So another thing that's came up quite a few times from people's check-ins, because I've had quite a few new people start just in like around the start of January. So everyone's going through this same sort of period. So it's fatigue and deloading, and then why deloading is important and how deloading will affect the weight in the scales and how fatigue will affect the weight in the scales. So the way like I get everyone to train. So you've seen the video I did on training intensity. So like every week we want to be adding a little bit more weight to the bar, or we want to be adding a couple of reps to the same weight that we were doing the week prior. So that's how we're going to keep pushing our body we're going to keep increasing the stimulus to our body, which is going to make our body respond by growing, by getting stronger, by getting more size in our muscles. That's how we're going to keep progressing in the gym. But then what's also happening on the back end of that is then our fatigue levels are going to increase over time. So what you'll find is on maybe the last week, so like you peak week of your program, which most people are on now because everyone started a new program in January, you find that the workouts are getting really hard. You're not quite able to push it quite as hard as you were. You're struggling to maybe hit the reps that you were the week before. You're like a little bit more tired. So this is like the fatigue building up in your body. So like your body, the hormonal changes happening in your body is the amount of cortisol, which is your stress hormone, it's increasing. So as the cortisol increases, it's going to make you retain water. And then the DOMS, like the delayed onset muscle soreness. So whenever your muscles are sore, big ones always for everyone is always legs. So your legs get really, really sore because you're able to shift so much weight with your legs. So you're going to get like really bad DOMS in your legs. Once then the muscle gets inflamed, your body's trying to repair the damage that you've caused. So the damage that you've caused in the muscle is what's going to make it respond and grow and get stronger, but it's also going to make your body hold on to more fluid because your body wants the nutrients that's in the fluid to be around the muscle to help the muscle recover and repair. So that's why the last week of a heavy training block, your weight on the scale will maybe go up a little bit or maybe just won't change at all, even if you're in a calorie deficit. And it's just the amount of extra cortisol is slowing your metabolism down. It's making you harder. That makes it harder to burn fat whenever your metabolism slows down. It's harder to regulate the amount of fluid that's going in and out of your muscles. So then what we'll do every 5 to 6 weeks, depending on the individual. So you'll generally find that people with a younger training age, so people that are just sort of starting out and training like this, can usually push 5, 6, maybe even 7 weeks before they need a deload. Whereas someone who's like quite advanced, and the more advanced you get, the greater the loads you're lifting is. So like the more weight is on the bar. So the difference in like squatting 60 kilos or squatting 160 kilos is going to have a big effect on how much fatigue your body's going to gather up, how much you're pushing your nervous system, and how much you're pushing your muscles to actually shift that amount of weight. So the more advanced you get, the more frequently you're going to have to deload because your body just can't keep going end on end week after week. So the 1 week deload then, what we do is we reduce the intensity till about 60% of what you're lifting. So if you were squatting 100 kilos, you're going to squat 60 kilos. And we reduce the volume by about 60%. So if you're doing 100 kilos for 10 reps, you're going to do 60 kilos for 6 reps. Just a rough ballpark figure. It doesn't have to be like calculators out to get it to exactly. So it's just a week where we're really, really stripping the volume and the intensity of the training back to allow your body to recover fully. Sometimes you feel like it's a little bit pointless. You're like, oh, well, I'm hardly lifting anything. Like, I'm not really pushing myself. Like, I feel like I should be doing more. But that's the whole purpose of it is that you want to deload before you feel like you need to deload. So you want to stay ahead of the curve. So it's going to help you recover better. It's going to lead to like less issues with like joint and connective tissues starting to hurt, knee pain, lower back tightness, all that sort of stuff. So we want to be deloading before any of that happens. So we're ahead of the injury curve. So like especially once you get older, once like you're north of 35, all these little like shitty niggles and aches that you get for no reason, and wake up one morning like my elbow's sore, I don't know what I did to it. That's just we want to get ahead of that. So we're deloading before that happens. And also, whenever you're doing that week, then where you're not coming in and really pushing it, you're really thinking in your head, like, I really can't wait to get back and get stuck into this. So it's like a psychological refresh as well. So that then when day one of the new training program starts, you're like chomping at the bit, ready to go in and fucking lift as much as you can because you're so psyched up to get back into it. So that's the two purposes it serves. So how that will affect the weight of the scale then is because your body will start to reduce the levels of cortisol because the inflammation in the muscles will start getting reduced, then it's going to lead to a noticeable drop in the weight on the scale. So depending on the size of the individual and how hard they've been pushing their training, like for me, I'll usually drop over a kilo. If I'm in a calorie deficit, I'll drop in over a kilo, and it'll be like very, very overnight. Like maybe like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I'll not see any difference in the scale. Thursday, I'll wake up and it'll drop by like 700 grams. Friday, I'll wake up and it'll drop by like another 500. I'll be like, Jesus Christ, it just went down 1.2 kilos in 2 nights. And that's just like literally all the fatigue just leaving your body. And once that happens and once the scale starts dropping, that's when I know my body's feeling fresh and I'm kind of ready to go again. So that's why I think deloading is like a big thing. Like there's an analogy with some people say you don't need to deload. And what I say to those people is your body will tell you you need a deload whether you want it or not. And whether that is you get a little injury that makes you have to sit out for 3 or 4 weeks and then you have to deload anyway, or you just keep pushing it and something breaks down more serious. So for me, it's something that I've been doing for probably the last, I don't know, 7, 8 years. And I've found like just such a massive difference in my ability to keep training hard for more consecutive weeks. So like the way the programming works is it's like 5 weeks of what's called accumulation. So we're week on week, we're accumulating more volume, more repetitions. And then once we're at the point where we're like getting really tired and we can't keep going, then we take that week off and then we start building it up. And just blocks of accumulation after accumulation, that's whenever you're going to see like real noticeable differences in your strength, your size, the muscle mass that you have, and the body fat then just coming down. Because if we can get our cortisol in check, where the cortisol levels aren't really high, our metabolism stays functioning really well, and then we're going to burn a lot of fat on the back end. So that's everything that I want to discuss, guys. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to drop them in the messages or turn on your mics off mute or anything.
Hi, Peter,
Okay.
just a really quick one. Just
Yeah, bro.
would you recommend, like, say in the mornings, if I was going early in the mornings training, would you recommend anything eating straight after training?
Right. So what I would recommend, you're talking about getting up before you have breakfast,
I would be going training there at six to seven, like, so I wouldn't even eat. Some mornings I wouldn't even eat, but
right? So I'll send you something. So just so everyone knows, right? I usually train fasted as well. So I'll normally be in 6 o'clock in the morning and I'll have clients usually 6 till 8, 6 till 9. And then as soon as they finish, I'll train. But what I do is I'll make a workout shake. So my workout shake will be, it's called cyclic dextrin. So it's basically like just pure powdered carbohydrates. So it's you can eat like a banana or you can eat a piece of fruit, but if you're like that's sitting at the base of your stomach and you're trying to push yourself, it, I know for me it makes me feel a bit nauseous. I feel like I'm going to be sick if I have some food. So this cyclic dextrin is just basically pure carbohydrates that go straight into your bloodstream because you're drinking it, and then you won't get that glycogen crash where you've like if you have no carbohydrates in your system, and then once all the glycogen's gone, then halfway through your workout, everything's just going to feel like shit. So I'll have my protein shake. My workout shake will be protein isolate, which is like a almost like a fruit juice consistency, whereas like a whey protein's more like milky, like a vanilla or a chocolate. That sort of stuff makes me feel sick as well because it's like imagine drinking a glass of milk while you're training, like it's not something you want to do. So I'll have my fruit flavored protein isolate and then my carbohydrate powder. So that's my workout shake to give me the energy I need during that workout. And then within an hour after I train, I want to be eating a decent meal. So usually the majority of my carbs will like if I was like splitting my carbohydrates so like 4 meals a day, I'd probably have like 35% of them after my workout along with my protein. So usually for me it's like a couple of 100 grams of Greek yogurt, mixed berries and oats. And I'll just make like overnight oats and have them in the fridge the night before. And then I finish training, quick shower, and then have my breakfast. That's what I would recommend.
Oh, that's lovely one. Cheers.
I'll send you a link to the carb powder. You can buy it off like My Protein. They do like there's different types of there's like dextrose, dextrin, cyclic dextrin. There's all different kinds, but some of them are like really, really fast acting, which means that you just burn them really fast and then you're fucking left back to square one again. Whereas if you use like the cyclic dextrin, it sort of lasts a bit. It's like 20 quid for like a kilo tub and like I mean it'll last me like 2 months. Like just a wee scoop of it every morning. And then get your carbs and proteins in afterwards. So something generally something that's quite light, especially like with something like oats and yogurt, whereas the oats are like quite fast acting and like they get in your bloodstream right away. Because like the sooner you can get the carbs into your system, the sooner your body can start recovering because you're damaging the muscle while you're training, but you need to repair the muscle. Like that's like the vital part of it is like if you don't recover from how much you're training, your body's just not going to respond. So like the number one thing for recovery then is food and sleep. So the more food you can get in faster, then the better your recovery is going to be. The less chance you're going to have of being really sore the next day as well because your body started to recover faster. Anyone else?
No, just when you're saying, Pete, about take a bit of carbs, before training, that's why I
Yeah.
said yesterday I felt tired. I didn't do any carbs at all before I went in the gym. It was just I had just the pure whey, just protein, no
Hmm.
carbs, and that's where I said I felt halfway through burnt.
Yeah.
The
That's
energy
it.
just wasn't there for the
Yeah.
weightlifting. So no, I see the importance of what you're saying. Maybe have a bit of carbs in you before you're doing the training.
Yeah. So I'll put it into the I'll put it into the group and I'll send you just the stuff that I use. But I mean you can get it. I mean you can get anywhere. Like you at worst case, like say if I ran out, you can literally use like orange juice or coconut water, something like that that's just got high carbs, like coconut water mixed with your protein shake if like vanilla protein and coconut water, like it, just to get those carbs and like fast acting carbs, like liquid carbs essentially.
Mhm.
Like that's like so then that's what we were talking about then before were like fasted training. So once your body would use all the glycogen, so like the last thing you probably ate was probably like 8 or 9 at night, and then you're in training at like 6 or 7 the next morning. So it's kind of been like 10 hours since your body's had any carbohydrates in. So basically whatever glycogen was stored in your body would have used up in the first half hour and then you just get that massive crash. That's
Mhm.
what I get. If I don't have my workout shake, I know that the second half of my workout's going to be shite.
Okay.
So I'll send it into the group and you can buy it in any supplement store. You can buy it online. There's loads of different types. So I'll send in the one that I use and you can check it out. But like I said, it's like 20 quid and it lasts me like 2 months.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. All
Anything
good.
else? Good stuff, lads. Well, look, thanks very much for tuning in, man. And I'll see you all next week. I'm going to be doing the same thing. So we're just going to do it week on week and just go through all the different stuff. So hopefully it makes sense, guys. Thanks very much for
Yeah.
attending, lads, and I'll chat to you all
All
soon.
right.
Cheers, Peter.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks. Cheers.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.